Okay, welcome to video number 29 of the Diaries of a Coronavirologist YouTube channel. Today is the 22nd of July and we are up to about 15 million confirmed cases of COVID-19 around the world and about 620,000 confirmed deaths. So after a week off, I'm back, feeling revitalized and ready for the second half of the year, ready to tackle this virus some more and tackle some more videos. Today I'm just going to do a fairly short one because I've got some other recordings I need to do for a different project, but I want to follow up on something I've been talking about a few times in a very timely manner. So I've done two videos previously talking about the Oxford vaccine against COVID-19 or against SARS2 to protect against COVID-19. So this is the ChAdOx vaccine, chimp adenovirus Oxford. Two previous videos I've done I'll link to down in the description for this video to save you going back through all my back catalogue to find them. But it's become a bit of a thing I've talked about a few times, so I figured I should follow up with the data that's been published as of 2 days ago in The Lancet regarding their phase 1/2 clinical trial. And just before I get going on the paper, though, I want to stress that I have no particular interest in this vaccine beyond scientific. I've done 3 videos on it and no others just because that's how it's fallen. I don't think this is necessarily the most perfect vaccine. I have no financial interest or anything like that. We haven't even done anything with it here. I'm planning to talk about a different vaccine approach in my next video. I'm just doing this one because it's timely and it just so happens that I've talked about this vaccine a couple of times already. So the paper was published on Monday in The Lancet, a very prestigious medical journal. So it's peer reviewed and it's been well received. And it's looking at the results in their phase 1/2 clinical trial. So for this, 1,077 patients were recruited into the trial and they were given either the ChAdOx vaccine, so the SARS2 vaccine, or a control vaccine that is a meningococcal vaccine. So they were given a vaccine in both cases. It wasn't a salt water injection or anything like that. It was two true vaccines. And it was a 1-to-1 ratio of who received the SARS2 vaccine or the meningococcal vaccine. It was a multi-centre trial, so it was done in multiple parts of England in 5, or at least the UK, in 5 different centres. And it was single-blinded. So the patients did not know which of the vaccines they received, whereas the administrators of the vaccine did know which they were given. However, all of the follow-up clinical work and laboratory work that was done to assess the responses of the vaccine, that was all blinded. So while it's not the perfect double-blinded thing, it was blinded in the follow-up assessments. So it's pretty good, pretty well-designed trial. And it was randomized how the people were put into the 2 different groups, so who got what. The other thing to say as well is it was healthy volunteers aged between 18 and 55, and about 90% of them are white, which I'll come back to at the end when I talk a little bit more about some of the discussion points in this paper. So the main goals of this study were to work out whether the vaccine was truly safe and whether it was having any kind of immunological effect in the patients. So to that end, people who were given either of the vaccines were assessed for any mild or more severe adverse events. And it was found that the people that got the ChAdOx vaccine had slightly higher instances of moderate reactions compared to the meningococcal vaccine control group. So for example, about 67% of people that received the ChAdOx vaccine reported having pain at the site of the vaccine compared to about 38% in the control group. Similarly, there were instances of fatigue and headache that occurred in the ChAdOx group at about 70% of the people compared to about 40% in the meningococcal group. And there was also some cases of mild fever. Now, importantly, most of these mild to moderate manifestations of a response were at day 1, day 2, very early stages after getting the injection, and they were self-limiting, so they disappeared over time. It was nothing long-lasting. It was just something they got after injection with the ChAdOx vaccine. And while it appeared more common in the people who got the SARS2 vaccine than the meningococcal vaccine, it went away similarly in both groups. So while there's some kind of mild stuff, a bit of discomfort, it's nothing severe, nothing to suggest that we shouldn't be using this vaccine, that it's not safe. And interestingly as well, the group also looked at prophylactic administration of paracetamol. So giving paracetamol to people before they go and get their injection, be that the control group or the SARS2 vaccine group. And this was found to have some degree of ameliorating those mild to moderate adverse reactions. So fewer people reporting pain or headaches and things like that. So it looks like paracetamol might be useful to take, and I'll come back to paracetamol momentarily. So as well as looking to see if it's safe and causes any severe reactions, the group also looked to see if it generated an immune response. So they've looked at antibodies, taking serum samples and blood draws from the patients. They looked to see whether there were antibodies that were specific to SARS2, and they found great news. At day 28, there was a peak in the level of antibodies against SARS2 in the vaccinated group, and that around 90% of those people that were vaccinated developed neutralizing antibodies. So these are the ones that stop the virus infecting cells and the ones that presumably are going to be the most effective at preventing an infection. And I say that the peak was at day 28, and this was in the group of people that received one dose of the vaccine. After day 28, there was a small decline in the level of antibodies, but they were still elevated at day 56, which is when the study was finished. There was a small number of people who received a prime boost vaccines. This is receiving the vaccine once and then getting a re-injection of the vaccine at a later time point. And in those patients, there was elevated and higher levels of antibody all the way out to day 56, which, as I say, was the end of the study. So it really looks like this vaccine is producing a good antibody response in these people. I will say, however, that when they were looking at the neutralizing antibody response, the number of people they actually looked at was fairly small. So they only looked at between 30 and 40 people. But that's reasonable because technical limitations, wanting to do this rapidly, get the information out and all those kind of things. I'm sure they're following up with all of the other 500 and whatever people they didn't do the assays on. But for now, it looks like this vaccine does give neutralizing antibody responses, which is what you want. And to quickly come back to paracetamol, acetaminophen, as I said I would, a small number of people received that prophylactic treatment, and that seemed to help ameliorate some of the adverse reactions, the pain associated with the vaccine, the fever and things like that. That prophylactic treatment in around 50 people didn't have any impact on the production of the antibody response. So it doesn't seem like it's having any adverse interaction with the vaccine's efficacy, and possibly is just helping to prevent some of those painful reactions that may occur. So that's good news. And moreover, they also looked at the T cell response. So it seems to be the case that antibodies against this virus are a bit hit and miss. Some people develop them, some people don't. Whether they're effective or not, there's a lot of questions about antibodies, but T cells are often neglected when people are talking about immunity to this virus, but they're slowly becoming more talked about, at least in the things I'm reading and seeing. And this group looked at the T cell responses and found that pretty much all the people that were injected with the vaccine developed a good T cell response against SARS2. So this T cell response was found to start at around day 7 and peak at about day 14, but was still high at day 56. So similar to the antibodies, takes a bit of time to come in, peaks in those initial stages, and then stayed all the way out to the end of this study at day 56. So this is great news. Both antibodies and T cells are up against SARS2 virus following vaccination with the ChAdOx vaccine in people that received it. So this is really good news. And while they may develop mild discomfort from the vaccine, that was all self-limiting and gone within the first couple of days. So this is really promising. So to that end, they've kind of hit their two aims. They've shown this vaccine is safe, and they've shown that it produces an immune response. Now, there are limitations, of course, to this study, and they admit a few of them themselves in the discussion. So they talk about the fact that it is not necessarily very generalizable. So this has taken healthy adults aged 18 to 55 with a median age of 35. So that's not necessarily very representative of full population. And 90% of the people were white. So again, this is not representative of a wider population, and there could be genetic differences that impact different populations. But they admit to this, and the goals of the phase 3 studies, which I'll talk about momentarily, are to expand upon this and to get a better handle on those things. The other limitations, of course, are the fact that it's still small numbers. So as I said, with the neutralizing antibody responses, it was only looking at about 35 to 40 people. So it's not the whole group, but it's still promising data, and it suggests this vaccine is working. And it's one of the first, well, one of the very early human studies to look at SARS2 vaccines, and it's looking promising. One thing that we can't tell from this study, though, is whether these immune responses actually provide any protection. It's just too early to tell, since this only goes out to day 56, and the people may not have been exposed to SARS2 and may not have developed COVID-19. So these people that have been part of this phase 1/2 trial are going to be followed for at least another year, and they're going to have samples drawn and look to see how long-lived those antibody response is and all those kind of things, and start to develop information about whether the vaccine is protecting those versus the control group from infection with SARS2. But more importantly, this study has allowed for the group to move forward to their phase 3 trial, which will provide even greater information about whether this vaccine is protective. So the phase 3 trial is much more extensive. They're going to be doing it in the UK still. So about 10,000 people are going to be recruited in the UK. It's going to be done in the US, where about 30,000 people are being recruited, along with Brazil, where there's going to be 5,000 people, and South Africa, where there are going to be 2,000 people. So this gives a much more diverse collection of patients, a much greater number of patients, and it's going to allow us to much better assess whether this vaccine is protective, especially doing it in places like the USA and Brazil, that they are going to be the best places to test vaccines, unfortunately, for these countries, whereas places like the UK now are not quite so good because the virus isn't spreading as extensively. So this is all really promising. Phase 3 being initiated. There's, I think, over 150 different vaccines, and I think it's about 4 that are in phase 3 trials now, this being one of them. So we're moving forward. The UK government have put aside funds, or are funding 100 million doses of this vaccine, along with other vaccine candidates. We don't know if this one's going to work. No one can tell which vaccine will work. But governments around the world are putting aside funds to make lots and lots of doses of lots of different candidate vaccines. So when we do find which ones are the best and which ones are effective, we are ready to go. So I remain optimistic that come 2021, we will have a vaccine, and there will be vaccines that are broadly available in that year. Still going to take a bit of time to work out which ones are protective. One silver lining of the continued spread of this virus is that we can actually work out whether vaccines are protective, and all of that will come in due course. As I said, I wanted to keep that video fairly short tonight because I've got some other stuff I need to get done today before I go and have dinner. As always, please subscribe, put a like if you're enjoying the videos, share it with friends and family and people who may take value from it. Leave comments and questions. I'm going to start really getting on top of taking the questions from the previous video and using them in the following video and all those kind of things to try and engage a little bit more with people that are engaging with me on these videos. And as always, please stay safe, wash your hands, wear a mask, and keep calm and carry on. We will get through this pandemic.